Did you know a medieval queen was crowned king? Or that another supposedly started a war over a fancy pair of trousers? One queen commanded armies while pregnant, another was married at 6 and widowed by 12, and one powerful ruler was even accused of poisoning her stepson with a piece of fruit. And get this, there were whispers. One queen was literally sawed in half. Medieval gossip was wild. These aren't fairy tales. They're the real, often brutal stories of women who wielded immense power when everyone expected them to just sit pretty. Number 7. The queen who united 3 kingdoms with pure grit and zero chill. Margaret I of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Imagine trying to get your family to agree on a pizza topping. Now imagine trying to get 3 whole countries, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, to basically become one big happy family. That was Margaret I's Tuesday. Born in 1353, she wasn't just a princess. She was a political chess master in a world run by dudes, who probably thought women were best suited for embroidery. Margaret was like, hold my ale. Her dad was the King of Denmark, and her hubby became King of Norway. Standard royal stuff. But then things got spicy. Her son, Olaf, was meant to inherit both kingdoms, and Margaret was all set to be the power mom regent. But Olaf tragically died young, just 17. Most people would be devastated, and Margaret probably was, but she didn't just weep into her royal hanky. Nope, she stepped up. Denmark was like, okay, you can be regent. Norway followed suit. Sweden was a bit of a mess at the time, with a super unpopular king, Albert. The Swedish nobles, tired of Albert's nonsense, looked over at Margaret, who was basically collecting kingdoms like Pokemon, and said, hey, can you help us out? Margaret, ever the opportunist, was like, you betcha. She sent in her troops, kicked Albert to the curb, and bingo, she was now in charge of Sweden too. This wasn't just a casual takeover. This was a strategic masterpiece. In 1397, she made it official with the Kalmar Union. This union basically said, hey, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, you're all buddies now, ruled by one monarch, okay? And for a good while that monarch was Margaret, even if her grandnephew Eric was technically the king she put on the throne. Everyone knew who was really calling the shots. She wasn't queen in the crowned and sceptered sense for all 3 simultaneously in her own name for the whole period, but she was the undisputed ruler, the architect of this massive Scandinavian power block. She navigated treacherous political waters, dealt with grumpy nobles, and kept this colossal union from falling apart through sheer willpower and smarts. She was so good at it that the Kalmar Union in various forms lasted for over a century after her death in 1412. Think about that, building something so huge it outlives you by 100 years. She didn't just dabble in politics. She was the politics. She faced rebellions, foreign threats, and the constant medieval drama of who's going to betray whom this week. Yet, she forged a super state. Why isn't she a household name like Elizabeth I? Maybe because Viking-era politics seems complicated, or maybe because history books just love focusing on kings with beards. But Margaret I, she was the queen who built an empire, no beard required. Number 6. the Crusader queen who ruled Jerusalem and wasn't afraid to share the throne, sort of Melisende of Jerusalem. Picture this. It's the 12th century, the height of the Crusades. Jerusalem is a Christian kingdom surrounded by enemies. And who's holding it down? Queen Melisende? Born around 1105, she was the eldest daughter of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. Back then, women inheriting kingdoms wasn't exactly common practice, but Baldwin II was a forward-thinking kind of guy. He made it super clear. Melisende was his heir, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. He even had her name put on coins and official documents before he died, just to make sure everyone got the message. When Baldwin II passed away in 1131, Melisende became Queen of Jerusalem. But because medieval times, she had to rule with her husband, Fulk of Anjou. Now Fulk was an experienced warrior and ruler from Europe, and he probably thought he could just sideline Melisende and take over. He tried to push her out, promoting his own buddies and ignoring her big mistake, huge. Melisende wasn't having any of it. She had powerful allies among the local nobility who were loyal to her, not this newcomer hubby. Things got so tense, there was practically a palace coup, with Melisende's supporters confronting Fulk. He quickly realized he'd messed with the wrong queen. After that little misunderstanding, Fulk learned to respect his wife's authority. They actually started ruling together, properly. Melisende was deeply involved in the day-to-day governance of the kingdom. She patronized art and architecture, including the famous Melisende Psalter, a stunning illuminated manuscript. She was a major player in church affairs and made important appointments. She was no mere figurehead. She was a decision-maker. When Fulk died in a hunting accident in 1143, their son, Baldwin III, was still a kid. So Melisende became regent. And she was good at it. She ruled Jerusalem solo for a while, making tough calls, dealing with threats from neighboring Muslim states, and keeping the Crusader kingdom afloat. The tricky part came when Baldwin III came of age. He wanted to rule alone, naturally. Melisende, having tasted full power and being pretty darn competent, wasn't super keen to step aside completely. This led to some serious mother-son tension, even a bit of a civil strife where Baldwin III had to assert his authority, eventually confining her influence to the city of Nablus. But even then she remained a significant figure. When Baldwin III was off on military campaigns, who did he trust to manage things back home? His mom, Melisende. She even came out of her semi-retirement to help him during a crisis when a major fortress was besieged. She raised troops and organized relief efforts. Talk about dedication. Melisende died in 1161, having navigated the incredibly complex and dangerous world of Crusader politics for decades. She ruled, she fought politically, she patronized arts, and she showed that a queen could be every bit as effective, if not more so, than any king. She's often overlooked because the Crusades are usually told as a story of knights and kings. But Queen Melisende was right there in the thick of it, shaping the destiny of the Holy Land. Number 5. The she-wolf who took down a king, her own husband, Isabella of France. Okay, so picture this. You're a French princess, beautiful, smart, and you get married off to the King of England, Edward II, in 1308. Sounds like a fairy tale. Right wrong, so very wrong. Isabella of France, born around 1295, walked into a royal mess. Her hubby, Edward II, wasn't exactly king material. He was, to put it mildly, easily influenced by his male favorites, particularly Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger. These weren't just casual friendships. These guys had all the power, and Edward showered them with lands, titles, and ignored pretty much everyone else, including his wife. Isabella tried to be a good queen. She had kids, including the future Edward III. She tried to mediate between her husband and his angry nobles, who were sick of the favorites running the show. But Edward just wouldn't listen. He was obsessed. Imagine your partner constantly prioritizing their bestie over you, giving them all your joint savings, and letting them redecorate the house without asking. Now multiply that by a kingdom. Isabella endured years of humiliation and neglect. The Despensers in particular seemed to go out of their way to antagonize her, seizing her lands and treating her with contempt. There's even a story that Hugh Despenser's wife flaunted ridiculously opulent clothes, possibly made from Isabella's confiscated wealth, which became a symbol of the regime's corruption and Isabella's mistreatment. The infamous war over trousers line has its roots in this kind of symbolic power struggle over wealth and status. The breaking point came when Edward sent Isabella to France, her homeland, to negotiate a peace treaty with her brother the French king. Big mistake, Eddie, huge. Once in France, Isabella was like freedom. She refused to come back to England unless the Despensers were banished. And then she did something even more scandalous. She took a lover. Not just any lover, but Roger Mortimer, one of Edward II's most powerful exiled enemies. Together, Isabella and Mortimer became the ultimate medieval power couple with a vendetta. They were like Bonnie and Clyde, but with crowns and armies. In 1326, they launched an invasion of England. It sounds insane, a queen invading her husband's kingdom. But here's the kicker: people flocked to her banner. The English were so fed up with Edward II and the Despensers that they welcomed Isabella and Mortimer as liberators. Edward's regime crumbled like a stale biscuit. The Despensers were captured and met very, very gruesome ends. Hugh Despenser the Younger was publicly hanged, drawn, and quartered. Medieval justice was not for the faint of heart. Edward II was forced to abdicate in favor of his son Edward III, with Isabella and Mortimer ruling as regents. What happened to Edward II? Well, he was imprisoned and died shortly after, under very suspicious circumstances. Many believe he was murdered on Isabella and Mortimer's orders. For a few years, Isabella, often called the she-wolf of France, and Mortimer were the most powerful people in England. They weren't exactly saints themselves, and their rule became increasingly unpopular. Eventually, young Edward III, tired of being a puppet, staged his own coup in 1330. Mortimer was executed, and Isabella was placed under a comfortable sort of house arrest. She lived out her days in relative peace, but her dramatic, ruthless, and ultimately successful takedown of a king remains one of history's most shocking power grabs. She wasn't just a scorned wife. She was a political force who reshaped England, even if her methods were a tad extreme forgotten. Hardly by historians, but for the sheer audacity of her actions, she deserves a blockbuster movie. Number 4. The Byzantine Empress who schooled the Holy Roman Empire, Theophanu. Imagine being a highly educated, sophisticated princess from the glittering heart of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, and then being shipped off to marry some dude in what you probably considered the barbaric West. That was Theophanu, and she didn't just cope. She pretty much took over. Born around 960. Theophanu was a big deal even before she set foot in the Holy Roman Empire, which covered much of modern-day Germany and Italy. She was likely related to the Byzantine Emperor John I Tzimiskes, a renowned military hero. Her marriage to Otto II, son of the Holy Roman Emperor Otto the Great, in 972 was a massive political alliance. East meets West with a wedding. When Otto the Great died in 973, Otto II and Theophanu became emperor and empress. Now, some of the German nobles and clergy were probably a bit sniffy about this foreign empress. They might have expected her to be a quiet, pretty face. They were in for a surprise. Theophanu was incredibly intelligent, well-educated, way more than most Western nobles, and politically savvy. She wasn't content to just hang tapestries. She was actively involved in governing. Her name appeared on official documents alongside her husband's, showing she was co-ruling. She even accompanied him on military campaigns. This was not your typical shrinking violet empress. Tragedy struck in 983 when Otto II died suddenly in Italy, leaving their son Otto III as a mere 3-year-old king. This was a recipe for disaster. Powerful dukes and bishops were already eyeing the throne, thinking they could push aside a foreign woman and a toddler. One ambitious relative, Henry the Quarrelsome, great name, right, even kidnapped young Otto III and tried to claim the regency or even the crown. But he seriously underestimated Theophanu. With incredible determination and political skill, Theophanu rallied loyal supporters. She wasn't just a grieving widow. She was a lioness, protecting her cub and her empire. She negotiated, she threatened, she formed alliances. She managed to outmaneuver Henry the Quarrelsome and get her son back. And then she took charge as regent. For the next 7 years, Theophanu effectively ruled the Holy Roman Empire. She wasn't just keeping the seat warm. She was making decisions, issuing decrees, meeting with ambassadors, and ensuring the stability of a vast and often unruly territory. She maintained peace, promoted her son's imperial authority, and continued her husband's policies, particularly in Italy. There were even whispers and accusations against her, a common tactic to discredit powerful women. Some chroniclers, likely those who resented her power or her Byzantine origins, might have hinted at dark deeds like the old trope of a stepmother poisoning a child. In this case, rumors might have circulated about her being involved in court intrigues, or even being too foreign and manipulative. It's said she faced accusations of trying to poison her stepson with an apple, a classic evil stepmother story, though this specific tale is more folklore than hard fact and often gets muddled between different powerful women of the era who faced similar slander. What is fact is that she faced immense opposition but overcame it. She was so respected or feared that she even issued charters and diplomas in her own name as Theophanius, Gratia Divina, Imperator Augustus, Theophanu, by divine grace, Emperor Augustus. Yes, she used the MALE imperial title. That's how much of a boss she was. She died relatively young, around 991, but she had successfully safeguarded the empire for her son Otto III, who would go on to be a significant emperor himself, deeply influenced by his brilliant Byzantine mother. Theophanu is often a footnote, seen as just Otto II's wife or Otto III's mom, but she was an empress in her own right, a Byzantine star who shone brightly in the West and held an empire together with sheer intellect and will. Number 3. The warrior countess who defied emperors and popes, Matilda of Tuscany. Get ready for a woman who was basically medieval Wonder Woman. Matilda of Tuscany, born around 1046 in northern Italy, wasn't just a countess. She was one of the most powerful feudal rulers of her time, a key player in the biggest political smackdown of the 11th century, the investiture controversy. This was a mega dispute between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor over who had the right to appoint bishops and abbots. Sounds dull. It was anything but. It was about ultimate power, spiritual and temporal. Matilda inherited vast lands in Tuscany and Lombardy, strategically vital territories right in the middle of this imperial papal tug of war. And she wasn't shy about picking sides. Matilda was fiercely loyal to the papacy, particularly Pope Gregory VII. This put her directly at odds with the Holy Roman Emperors, Henry IV, and later Henry V. She wasn't just sending encouraging notes to the Pope. She was leading armies, commanding fortresses, and using her immense wealth and influence to support the papal cause. This woman personally led troops into battle. In an age when women were supposed to be delicate and demure, Matilda was out there like a general. One of the most iconic moments of the investiture controversy happened at Matilda's own castle of Canossa in 1077. Emperor Henry IV, having been excommunicated by Pope Gregory VII, a huge deal, basically kicking him out of the church and inviting his nobles to rebel, had to beg the Pope for forgiveness. And where did this epic moment of imperial humiliation take place? At Matilda's fortress, with Matilda herself playing a crucial role as mediator. Imagine the emperor barefoot in the snow for 3 days, waiting outside her castle walls. Matilda was at the center of it all. She was married twice. First to Godfrey, the hunchback, Duke of Lower Lorraine, and much later, when she was in her 40s, to Welf V of Bavaria, who was like 17. Neither marriage was particularly happy or successful politically in the long run. Godfrey was often on the emperor's side, making things awkward. The marriage to Welf was purely a political alliance to bolster the anti-imperial faction, and it didn't last. There were even crazy rumors and accusations thrown at her by her enemies to discredit her. Because she was so powerful and defied traditional gender roles, and because her second marriage was childless and politically motivated, whispers flew. Some imperial propagandists might have spread rumors that she was infertile, or even that she wasn't truly a woman, perhaps hinting she was a man in disguise or bewitched, as a way to explain her unfeminine strength and authority and her failure to produce an heir with wealth. The claim that her husband tried to divorce her by saying she was a man is a more dramatic interpretation of the kind of slander powerful, unconventional women faced. More likely, the issues were political, and a lack of heirs. Matilda remained a dominant force in Italian politics for decades. She fought wars, negotiated treaties, and patronized the church. She was highly educated, spoke multiple languages, and amassed a significant library. She even commissioned a biography of herself, ensuring her story would be told, though probably with a bit of a pro-Matilda spin. When she died in 1115, she bequeathed all her extensive lands to the papacy, a move that had massive long-term consequences for the political map of Italy and the power of the popes. Matilda of Tuscany was a true anomaly for her era, a woman who held and wielded immense secular and military power, who stood up to emperors and who played a pivotal role in shaping European history. She's sometimes called La Grande Contessa, the Great Countess, and she absolutely earned the title. Why isn't she on every powerful women in history list? Good question. Maybe her story is just too epic to fit neatly into simple narratives. Number 2. The warrior queen who fought her own husband and was rumored to be sawn in half. Urraca of León and Castile. Hold onto your helmets, because Urraca of León and Castile was a medieval queen who redefined drama. Born around 1080, she became the first reigning queen in European history, not just a queen consort, but the actual boss of her kingdoms. Her dad, King Alfonso VI, lost his only son, so he named Urraca his heir. This was a huge deal. When he died in 1109, Urraca, already a widow from her first marriage to Raymond of Burgundy, with whom she had a son, the future Alfonso VII, became Queen of León, Castile, and Galicia. Now, being a lone queen in the 12th century was like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Her nobles were restless, and there were constant threats from the Almoravids, a Muslim dynasty, to the south. The solution, everyone thought, was for Urraca to remarry quickly. So she married King Alfonso, the first of Aragon, also known as Alfonso the Battler. And battler was an understatement. Their marriage was an absolute disaster. A 5-alarm dumpster fire. They were both strong-willed, ambitious rulers, and they clashed constantly, violently. Instead of uniting their kingdoms and creating a Christian superstate in Iberia, their marriage sparked civil war. Yes, Urraca ended up literally at war with her own husband. They fought over lands, power, and who was really in charge. Alfonso the Battler was notoriously aggressive and reportedly treated Urraca terribly. There were accounts of him publicly humiliating her, even physically abusing her. Urraca wasn't one to take that lying down. She was a fighter. She led her own armies, sometimes even while pregnant. She rallied her loyal nobles and fought back against her husband and other rebellious factions. Her half-sister, Teresa of Portugal, also tried to grab some land. It was a free-for-all. Urraca's reign was one long series of battles, sieges, betrayals, and desperate alliances. She had to contend with her husband, trying to control her kingdoms, powerful nobles who switched sides whenever it suited them, and the church which eventually annulled her disastrous marriage to Alfonso the Battler on grounds of consanguinity. They were distant cousins, a convenient excuse. Even after the annulment, the fighting didn't stop immediately. The personal animosity was that intense. The rumor about her being sawn in half is almost certainly a gruesome piece of medieval propaganda or a wild exaggeration, possibly spread by her enemies to demonize her or Alfonso. There's no credible historical evidence for such a specific and barbaric act against her, but it speaks volumes about the brutality and the vicious slander prevalent during her incredibly turbulent reign. What is true is that she endured immense hardship and violence. Despite the chaos, Urraca managed to hold onto her throne and, crucially, secure the inheritance for her son, Alfonso VII. She was constantly on the move, from one castle to another, putting out political fires and leading military campaigns. She was a queen who truly lived life on the front lines. She made mistakes sure. Her temper was legendary, and her political maneuvering could be ruthless. But given the circumstances, a woman trying to rule in her own right in an incredibly patriarchal and violent age with a hostile husband and rebellious vassals, it's a miracle she survived, let alone reigned for 17 years. Urraca died in 1126, possibly from complications in childbirth. She left a legacy of fierce determination and a kingdom battered but intact for her son. She's often overshadowed by the kings who came before and after her. But Urraca was a trailblazer, a warrior queen who fought tooth and nail for her crown and her lands. She proved a woman could rule, and rule fiercely. Number 1. The saintly teen queen who was crowned King and United Nations, Jadwiga of Poland. This story is so wild, it sounds like something from a fantasy novel, but it's 100% real. Meet Jadwiga, or Hedwig, born around 1373. She was the youngest daughter of Louis the Great, King of Hungary and Poland. When Louis died without a male heir, the Polish nobles had a bit of a dilemma. They didn't want another personal union with Hungary under Jadwiga's older sister, Maria, and her husband. They wanted their own ruler, living in Poland. So they chose young Jadwiga. She was just a child, around 10 years old, when she arrived in Poland in 1384. And here's where it gets super interesting. The Polish nobles crowned her Rex Poloniae, King of Poland, not Queen King. This wasn't a typo. By crowning her king, they emphasized that she was a monarch in her own right, with all the sovereign powers that entailed, not just a king's wife. It was a legal move to secure her status as the actual ruler, independent of any future husband. Imagine being a pre-teen and suddenly you're not just royalty, you're king. Mind-blowing. Now, Jadwiga was already betrothed to William A. Habsburg Prince from Austria. They were apparently quite fond of each other. Childhood, sweethearts, practically. But Polish politics had other plans. The nobles saw a golden opportunity, a union with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Lithuania was huge, one of the last pagan states in Europe, and a frequent enemy of Poland. If Jadwiga married Jogaila, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, it would create an incredibly powerful Polish-Lithuanian state. Jogaila promised to convert to Christianity, bring all of Lithuania with him, and unite the two realms. It was a giddily masterstroke. There was just one problem: Jadwiga's heart. She was reportedly devastated at having to give up William for this much older pagan duke she'd never met. Chronicles tell stories of her weeping and even trying to chop down the castle gates with an axe to escape, and go to William. Whether that axe story is totally true or a bit embellished, it shows the immense personal sacrifice she was being asked to make for her country. She was a teenager forced to choose between personal happiness and the future of her nation. After much prayer and counsel, she was deeply religious. Jadwiga agreed to the marriage for the good of Poland and the Christianization of Lithuania. In 1386, Jadwiga, barely a teenager, married Jogaila, who was baptized as Ladislaw I Jagiello. He was crowned King of Poland, ruling jointly with Jadwiga. But make no mistake, Jadwiga was not a passive co-ruler. She was highly intelligent, well-educated. She spoke several languages, including Latin, Hungarian, German, Polish, and possibly Serbian, and actively involved in the affairs of state. She engaged in diplomacy, mediated disputes, and even led a military expedition in 1387 to reclaim Red Ruthenia, part of modern-day Ukraine, for Poland, though it was more of a diplomatic show of force than a bloody campaign. Jadwiga was renowned for her piety, charity, and wisdom. She founded hospitals, supported scholars, and financed the restoration of the Krakow Academy, later Jagiellonian University, one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in Europe. She was beloved by her people. Tragically, her life was cut short. In 1399, at the age of about 25 or 26, Jadwiga gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Bonifacia. But the baby died after only a few weeks, and Jadwiga herself died a few days later from complications. It was a national tragedy. Despite her short reign, Jadwiga's impact was enormous. The Polish-Lithuanian union she initiated lasted for centuries and created one of the largest and most powerful states in Europe. Her personal sacrifice and wise rule led to her being venerated as a saint in the Catholic Church. She was a young girl who was given the title of king, who made a heartbreaking choice for her people and who laid the foundations for a new European superpower. She wasn't just a forgotten queen. She was a nation-shaping king, a saint, and a truly remarkable young woman whose legacy deserves to be shouted from the rooftops.